Hello, everybody. How you all doing? I was thinking that during the lockdown would be a perfect opportunity to do lots more vlogs, but it hasn't really worked out like that. Somehow the time has really gone rather fast, and there's been plenty to do, but there's so much going on, and I just wanted to add a little bit of context in terms of what's going to be happening with the planets for the rest of this year. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about lockdown. Will we have a second phase of the virus, a second lockdown, a second wave? Now, the government's been talking about it. Some of the scientific advisors have been talking about it. A lot of the governments are really prepping us for this second wave. You know, they've been putting it into the discourse, and the alternative media have really run with it. They've been talking about it a lot too. So I wanted to look astrologically and see if it's a possibility. David and I keep saying September. So is Max Egan. They're talking about September. I don't think it's going to be September. I think it'll be a little bit later. So I'm going to be talking about that. Also want to be talking about the riots in the context of the American chart, and a little bit of a political chat there about the riots too. And also talk about other predictions, because, you know, with the whole Saturn-Pluto conjunction, Saturn representing, hello guys, hi PG Brexit and 47 Moochie. So with the whole thing with Saturn-Pluto, Saturn representing the establishment, structure, Pluto representing destruction, we are going to see the fall of many of the institutions that we've known. Going back to the 2009 recession, there were a lot of things that disappeared off the map, off the high street. We're going to see a lot more of that going on now. This represents an opportunity for us and also a risk. I think the thing here with the globalists is they've shown their hand. It's a game of poker. They've shown their hand. I think it's totally clear now what they're up to, what their plan is. That represents a great opportunity for us, a big danger for them. Hi guys, thank you for the support. I'd love to do a lot more, but time flies, you know, you don't always get to do as many as you'd like. So let's first talk about back in March, just before the UK went into lockdown, which was around the 23rd of March, but there was a little bit of a build-up. We had the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, right? That happened just before the lockdown, and at that stage, Neptune was at 80 degrees of Pisces, and Saturn was heading into Aquarius direct. Now, while there will be another Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, this time Jupiter's moving backwards. But the last Jupiter-Pluto conjunction happens around the 8th of November. So that to me is going to be a key phase, the 8th of November, because like when we went into lockdown in the UK, around the 8th of November, Neptune is again on 18 degrees of Pisces, and Saturn is again direct, heading off into Aquarius. It's in the late stages of Capricorn Saturn, but it's direct and heading towards Aquarius. So astrologically, going between the 8th and the 16th of November, we have exactly the same astrological conditions as when lockdown was full on in Europe and we were easing into lockdown in the UK. So if there's going to be a second wave, it seems highly likely it's going to be in that November phase. But quite importantly, that would be after the American election. Now, Jupiter in Capricorn has been very lucky for Republican presidents. When Reagan won an absolute landslide, I think the only state he didn't win was Minnesota, actually, where all the action is now in terms of Minneapolis and what went on there. I think in 1984, that was the only state Reagan didn't win. He won California. He did the whole lot, except for Minnesota. Maybe not Hawaii as well, actually. I'd have to check that because I was thinking of the mainland. And other times there's been Jupiter in Capricorn, been very lucky for Republican presidents. So I think it's going to be probably not a landslide in the same way that Reagan did it. I think it's going to be a big win for Trump. And I think what's going on with the riots, certainly it's meant to destabilize the president. It's meant to make him look bad. But a lot of people, when you think those people some people are peacefully protesting, a lot of the people who are being violent are the usual suspects, the ones that are paid by Soros, by whoever, by the instigators. But a huge amount of people, the vast majority, the millions of Americans are looking at that and thinking, we don't want this. We don't want more infrastructure destroyed. What's this doing? It's making it more difficult for small business. It's also a lot of people letting off steam after lockdown. So if Trump does come out of this and comes down quite strongly on this, I think it's going to be what a lot of people want. There is, to me, a danger here. I think they're pushing Trump to go into martial law, or even to do the Insurrection Act, because once that's been done, it'll make it easier to do against people who might protest against vaccines or might protest against lockdown. So there's a danger here. In one way, if Trump acts really strongly, I think there'll be an awful lot of voters which will say, great, we don't want this sort of violence, we don't want this anarchy, it must be clamped down on, and therefore we agree with a strong response. But at the same time, that strong response could backfire when other people want to protest against further lockdowns or vaccines. So there's a danger as well. But I still am looking forward and thinking that this is going to be a really strong win for Trump, because Biden is obviously such a weak candidate. And again, he's got the incumbency advantage, better the devil you know. A lot of people who had grave misgivings will probably look at it and think, well, it hasn't worked out that badly. And in addition, he's probably the right person to get the economy going again. So let's see, guys, what happens with the second phase, November between the 8th and 16th, because astrologically the planets are in exactly the same position. And you must remember, at the end of the year, we have the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius, the first degrees of Aquarius, which I say is pivotal to Agenda 21. And as we know, this whole lockdown, the whole virus thing is hugely advanced their march to Agenda 21. However, it's also woken so many people up, because so many people kind of know what we've been saying, not me specifically, but say the David Ickes of the world, Alex Jones, Max Egans, they know what we've been saying all along, and now they see it actually happening. It's waking people up. Just to say quickly about the concept of free speech. Free speech, we've always told, in a democracy, we have our free speech. However, it was purely theoretical, because how was any of us really going to exercise our free speech? We either needed to form a political party or start our own radio station, which is pretty much impossible in the UK because of how licensing works, or in other countries. I think in America, there's a lot more opportunity to have free speech. But in a large part, it was theoretical, unless you wrote into a newspaper or you rang up a radio station where you had to rely on being put on air, and you could be cut off at any time. You could be silenced at any time. There was always a gatekeeper to get past. And anyone who worked in the media, and the TV and the radio, those people are all pawns, because they're subject to the control of their editor, who's going to quash them down if they don't like the stories they're writing. We know, of course, Katie Hopkins wrote about some stuff quashed down. There's certain things that the media are gatekeepers. So this whole free speech thing was theoretical until the internet and social media came along. And that's why we see such a concerted effort at censorship, because they realize now, wait a minute, people are embracing this free speech, and it's really detrimental to our cause. But one of the other great things that I think could come out of all the negativity of the virus and the lockdown is that people have turned away from mainstream media. Look at Sky News. They haven't had their Sky Sports to bulk up the revenue. They were loss-making as it is. This must put more and more pressure on their finances. You can see from their output, it's becoming a skeleton staff. It's really, you can see that they don't have a lot of money to put into their content anymore, and it definitely shows. There's a lot of pressure now on the BBC. Lots of shows being axed, like Victoria Derbyshire on BBC Radio. You will see now the axing of more and more shows. And in America, you'll see big TV networks dissolving because people are not watching them. People only have so many hours in a day. And for every hour you guys are watching me right now, you could be watching BBC, watching ITV. You could be watching any of those, but you're not watching them. They don't have the viewer numbers, which means they can't get the ad revenue in, which means they're going to have to cut back. So I think everyone on YouTube is putting out great content, is helping bring down these institutions like the media, who are not on the side of democracy, progress, capitalism, and freedom. The other question mark people said, like, they're expecting the bounce. They say there's all this pent-up demand. Yeah, but I can't go tomorrow and have 3 haircuts. I may have been, well, I don't really go to the hairdresser that often, to be frank, but, you can't, there are lots of things. You can't go and have your nails done 3 times next week when things open. So there's a lot of things where this pent-up demand thing just doesn't work. So a lot of people were saying, is it going to be a V, when it's sort of, we've had this dip, because of the lockdown, and then it's going to sort of spring back up. Other people say, will it be a sort of W, it springs back up, then the second wave down and up again? But other people saying it's either going to be like a lightning strike, where it goes down, improves a bit as people come out of lockdown and start feeling better, but then the whole ramifications of everything, the social distancing, which is going to make it very hard for people to get footfall, falls down again. Now, I do believe that Primark have £2 billion worth of stock stuck in their warehouse. As you guys know, the ladies out there, usually there would have been sales in March. A whole lot of new stock would have come in that would have been sold May, June, and then there would have been sales again. So there's a huge amount of stock now. It's all going to have to go on sale because we're heading to the end of the summer season. You know, July sales, that's it. 2/3 of Brits not thinking of going on holiday. That means all the kind of tan cream, sunglasses, costumes, stuff they would have bought, not going to be purchased. That's going to be a big hit. Plus, with social distancing, many smaller restaurants are going to find it impossible to get enough people in to make them profitable. They're going to have to lay off staff as well. They won't need as many staff. They won't need as much food. I did a little walk and talk in our local high street to show something ridiculous that's going on with the social distancing measures there, that it's an absolute small business killer. I want to talk to you about that later, but since I've got a lot to say, let's move on. Looking to the American chart, quite interesting. During these riots, we've had Pluto in Capricorn opposite their Mercury in the 8th house in Cancer. Mercury rules the 7th house. I had a look back to the Ferguson riots, and I found that Pluto was opposite the Sun in the 7th house. So indicates to me that but when these riots happen, there's a big activation of the 7th house, which says to me it's the enemy without, not the enemy within. So these people instigating the riots, it's not a civil uprising. It's not a grassroots uprising. It is being orchestrated by America's enemies. But Pluto will continue to aggravate that position of Mercury in the 8th, which happens to be opposite Pluto in the 2nd, Pluto being at 27 degrees of Capricorn. So it won't be too long before Pluto's done a full revolution in the American chart and lands up on 27 degrees of Capricorn again in the 2nd house, which I say is going to be a grave threat to the dollar. And to back that up, as you know, Israel's very dependent on funding from America, but Israel have been strengthening their ties with China, very, very strong, lots of bilateral trade agreements, etc., etc. Israel are hedging their bets. They're betting on the downturn of America, and they are going to get into the niche with China. However, can they really... do they think America's going to really China's really going to take America's place? I'd say it's a gamble, but it's just something to look at there. I also wanted to talk about the collapse of banks. Now, the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction is prevalent in the chart of Deutsche Bank. Now, if you look at the stock of Deutsche Bank, it looks like the trajectory of a bad altcoin, a bad cryptocurrency, because it's just gone off the charts, the stock prices. Absolutely plummeted. Deutsche Bank on their last legs, and I think one of these Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions this year in Capricorn are going to kill it off. So that's going to be one of the big casualties, although I see quite a few casualties. You guys watching in the UK, you'll know that there's a company called INTU who owns some of the largest shopping malls in the UK, for example, Trafford, Lakeside, Watford, they own Truro, and also Metro Centre, which is one. These include some of the biggest in Europe, if you're watching in the UK, like Lakeside, Trafford, and Metro Centre. Some of the biggest shopping malls in Europe are owned by this company, INTU. They have approached KPMG and said, get ready for administration, because if they are not able to reach a new sort of agreement with their creditors at the end of this month, June 26th, they're going to administration. What does that say for all the retail, for the department stores? Here you get the lightning, you see, just coming out of recession, people beginning to go back to shops, but you're going to start seeing bankruptcies because this is just totally unsustainable, this lockdown for the retail environment who are in the UK. And I know in America with Sears and your big companies, I think Abercrombie and Finch have been having problems, and it's exactly the same on the UK high street where stores just can't make ends meet. And now with the queuing, I mean, if you're going to be queuing outside a department store and the social distancing going on where you can only have limited footfall, it's dire. I mean, stores need to be cram-packed on a Saturday. They rely on people flooding malls on a Saturday afternoon or morning, all the teenagers coming out to hang out on malls. They rely on that for their footfall. If they're not having that, I can see some big names falling. We've already had, I mean, Debenhams on its last legs, but we're even looking at John Lewis. Can they survive? Because I think we'll see some big scalps. And the whole thing about Saturn, Pluto represents that some of these companies that have been going, institutions been going for ages, could actually fall. What about more travel companies as well? Okay, I just wanted guys to touch on Ireland, Teresa, and I know a couple of you have asked me again to look at the Irish chart. Haven't looked in detail, but do you remember at the beginning of the year, I said there was a hint of kind of rebellion in the Irish chart, and I said maybe it's going to be because of Brexit, tensions are going to arise with the UK again. It could be a rise of the IRA, but I think no. I think what it is actually a rise of Irish patriotism, as was seen in the 1916 kind of uprising and in the first the birth of Ireland in 2021. I see a lot going back to that. I know Gemma O'Doherty and John Waters are doing a lot with Anti-Corruption Ireland. They're very, very small at the moment, but I just think they could spark something there. And Ireland could be a country, they kind of were so far behind in one way in terms of the populist movement, but they could surge. I mean, all the other parties are a third. There is just an opening there. And because of what's going on in the chart, I think we should keep a strong eye on Ireland. Let's not underestimate the kind of effect that Gemma might be having, or maybe it's not only Gemma. I know she says that the IRexit movement is a fake nationalist movement, and we keep having to watch out for these fake movements. Uranus in Taurus, we said the end of cash, or possibly the end of cash, and a lot of people have been saying that with this COVID, because of course you have cash transferring the germs and whatnot. I don't think we're going to see the end of the cash right yet. If you watched any of you guys who watched the series Spiral, the French series Engrenage, one of the big themes in the last episode, series 7, was money laundering. And they showed how money laundering is very often connected with politicians, with bankers, and with the drug world. And so I think, as you know, the poppy fields and all that, and Arkansas, a lot of these elites get a lot of their money off the drug trade, and therefore money laundering, whole gambling, everything, prostitution, it's all wound in with that. You still need cash for that to flow, and I don't think altcoins and Bitcoin is ready to take up that market or even appropriate for that market. So for that reason, I don't think we're going to see the end of cash quite yet, but certainly the whole blockchain phenomenon and the use of blockchain is going to surge along with Bitcoin. Will keep getting stronger and stronger. Now, Mussolini said that the best way to explain fascism is to say that fascism is corporatism. And I think that's shown absolutely beautifully by these riots. And I've got something to read you, something that was said by Tucker Carlson, but it totally applies to this country. So he said, with these riots, what do we hear? We hear a lot about a riot is the voice of the unheard. And that message comes from absolutely everywhere, every media source, every corporation, every university. It's the voice of the unheard. Rioters are burning down the town because, they're frustrated. They're unheard. However, the rioters burning down your city, said Tucker Carlson, have the support of virtually everyone richer than you. So to say they're unheard, in contrast, they are being given every platform and being continually heard. And he said, but corporations aren't just tweeting their support for riots and encouraging it almost, they're paying for them too. He said the CEO of Cisco said his company's donating $5 million to Black Lives Matter. Airbnb is donating $500,000, and so is Dropbox. Video game maker Ubisoft has given $100,000. Intel has pledged $1 million to associated groups like Black Lives Matter, etc., etc. And what about Pepsi? He said, yes, Pepsi is donating as well. He doesn't actually go on to say how much. So the question is, now they're getting all this money, what are Black Lives Matter going to do with it? So let's look at their manifesto on their website. So apparently one of the key aims of Black Lives Matter is to have prisons abolished and to have prisoners released. One of the other key aims is to defund all police forces. So this sounds to me like anarchy, like an anarchist movement. It doesn't sound like it's just about equality and justice and fairness. It sounds like it actually wants to tear down the judicial or the police infrastructure. The other goal, as stated on their website, is to disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. Well, apparently that's also something major corporations are getting behind. You see here the corporatism. We have these so-called movements, political movements, anarchist movements, totally supported by big corporations. These movements, along with Antifa, are fascist. They supported by the biggest corporations. So there you go. So with all the money flowing out of the country's most profitable corporations, maybe Tucker Carlson said, can't they donate some money to rebuild the small businesses that have possibly been damaged and decimated? But no, that's absolutely not the plan. The plan is to destroy small business, which is what a social distancing is about, because the bigger businesses just get stronger and stronger and stronger. So I do think as well, these lockdown protests were a way out. Everyone said the government didn't have an exit strategy, especially in this country, for lockdown. This has provided an exit strategy because everyone is suddenly not worried about it. I mean, a lot of younger people were totally on board. The woke culture were totally on board with this: stay at home, stay alive, save lives, let's be locked down. And yet they're the ones that are predominantly rioting now. So obviously they're not taking it that seriously. Some people saying, oh, maybe this will be the excuse to have a second wave and they can blame it on the rioters. But I really don't think the second wave will be this soon, because they haven't got their vaccine ready and we're just coming out of it. They certainly want the summer to be semi back to normal, just to, get people to relax again, start thinking, that give some people something to look forward to, right, before they possibly lay it on. I really hope I'm wrong, by the way. I'm hoping I'm totally, totally wrong, because I've had enough of all this lockdown and it's not going to be great. So let's look at one of the other possibilities, is hyperinflation. Now, obviously, with Uranus Taurus, there's always the possibility with hyperinflation, because it ties in with the time in Germany in the 1930s when there was hyperinflation, when Uranus was in Taurus. So it is a possibility. You think so many people are being paid to sit at home and do nothing because they're under furlough, but they're still getting paid. So we have far fewer goods and services being produced. People still have the money to buy. What does that do? Creates higher demand, and supply pushes up prices, plus more disruption to the supply chain. All the planes that aren't flying, the commercial liners who would have usually been transporting goods and services around, not flying. These riots in America, again, possibly disrupting supply chains, disrupting outlets. So we have a supply chain issue, and I don't think we've had the full, really experienced in full how that's going to impact, which can also go towards the hyperinflation. Unemployment massive, because this is decimating the tourism industry, the restaurant trade. Even if they get semi back to work, the social distancing is going to mean fewer staff needed, lower footfall, and things going out of business. So unemployment, definitely something that's going to be on the increase. During the time of this last set of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Libra in 1982 was a very bad time for unemployment in America. But with this one in Capricorn, I think we're seeing something totally unprecedented. Another problem is asset stripping. China have got a lot of money. They haven't suffered from this. They are easily able to pick up stocks, shares, property. I know in Ireland, China are buying up a lot of assets from hotels, infrastructure, etc. So that's a very big danger. When I'm talking about China, I think we should just talk about China versus Bill Gates. A lot of us talk about Bill Gates being kind of the head honcho in the elite at the moment, even more so than Soros, in terms of he's driving the whole new world order. How is he doing it? Well, he's donating to all these institutions like the World Bank, the WEF, the World Health Organization, and he's leveraging his control by getting involved in all these global organizations and calling the shots because he's the main person donating. That is how he's exercising his control. And yes, China, he's working with China very, very closely, because as we've talked about, China's the experiment, the model. They're doing all the social credit score, the crackdown on free speech, the communism. Yeah, they want to roll out the Chinese model, absolutely. So Gates versus China, right? He's working with them. But who's got the real power? It's China. They've got the infrastructure. They've got the hardware. They've got the bridges around the world, the waterways, the canals. They've got an army. They've got a navy. They control vital infrastructure around the world. They've got the hardware. Gates, what has he got? He's got bribery, basically, and propaganda. He's got the ear of these useless, lily-livered Western politicians. That's what he's got. I'd say overall, Gates's power is weak and non-existent, and he thinks he's going to work with China. Chinese must realize their power is vastly greater than what he's got. They'll roll him over. So I think a lot of us can look forward. Yeah, Gates, knock yourself out. Do your best. But when it's going to come down to you and China at some point, and I would back the Chinese at basically having more power than you. I mean, I know that's not wonderful in terms of, but I think we look at Gates as the power. I think he's very, very weak in this chess game he's playing with the rest of the world. I think China, if he's putting his eggs in their basket, working with them, can he trust them? Really? Can he trust them? I just wanted to put that out there, guys. See if you, see if you agree with that. Okay, so Deutsche Bank and other banks. I see TV channels capitulating. We're going to have big department stores. Another thing that I see this whole, not only COVID, but the big reset that's happening, killing off is universities. It's just not worth people's while to rack up all that debt to go somewhere where the main thing about university is no longer going to be merit. It's all going to be about fairness, diversity. It's all these other things which detract from an education. And what with all these courses you can do now, Udemy and very reputable courses and self-learning, and in an age of technology, the universities are way behind. They're teaching things that aren't even going to be relevant to a new world with AI. The youngsters coming up who are really into technical things, into computers, or possibly other areas, are really going to get ahead. Universities are old-fashioned. They are not fit for purpose in the world we're going into for AI. And I see a lot of them almost dying out or losing their power, as well as people not having the money to afford to go there. I think they won't be as popular. So I think because they won't be as popular and when many people won't go, going to definitely lose their power, which is something. Now, the World Economic Forum, as you know, it was a few days ago. They came out and one of the big wigs from there, bald guy, Bilderberger, was yabbering on, about the big reset and how this COVID thing and the lockdown is a wonderful opportunity for this big reset, which we know what the big reset that they planning is, don't we? It's the new capitalism, they call it, which is more like the new communism. To quote them, it's all about social justice, social, basically it's about social justice, equality, all those buzzwords. What you don't hear them saying about is that it's about freedom, democracy, property rights. No, you don't hear about any of those things. I noticed Prince Charles is well on board with that, and he was having a lot to say about it. So I have some quotes from him on the big reset as well. The problem I have with all these vague terms, like the big reset's going to be about justice and social equity and all these buzzwords, is they're very vague concept. It's all very subjective. Good thing about capitalism, it's about profit and loss. It's about selling more. It's about improving your bottom line. It's about being more efficient, so you lower your costs, you produce more, you sell more. It's very simple. It's all very objective. The objectives are straightforward. And no, the objectives may not be moral because it's a little bit greedy, but it works because it's clear. When you have objectives like social justice, diversity, fairness, blah, 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 it's all a matter of opinion. Fairness is in the eye of the beholder. Who's going to determine what justice is? What it requires is a massive infrastructure of moral arbiters who are going to sit there in perpetual judgment of everyone and everything, deciding what's fair, what's equal, what's not. Can you imagine the mess? How are you ever going to get consensus on this even? It's just going to clog up the works, complicate everything horribly. And as we know with communism, when you try and, you end up bringing everyone down to the lowest common denominator and absolutely destroying productivity, which will happen. So what did we have seen in this whole scenario? We saw, first of all, the fear. Then it was the panic buying, which gave them an excuse to bring in the rationing and the queuing. Then we had lockdown. We had massive censorship, trying to stop people querying the lockdown, querying whether this was a virus. Has the virus been identified? Is a vaccine the way forward? No, it isn't. But they didn't want people debating and questioning, hence more and more censorship. People like David Icke permanently deleted, etc., etc. Then we had all the false masks. Then we had the disinformation about PPE, false numbers, should I say. Lots of disinformation about PPE. And now we have springing forth, I'm sure you've noticed it in the USA and in the UK, is all the social distancing signs. The infrastructure for this social distancing is absolutely everywhere. must have spent a fortune on all these posters. This is going in place. It's not going away. I can't see that it's just going to evaporate because they've spent a lot of money investing in it and doing the kind of neurolinguistic programming, putting it all in our heads to get us kind of used to it. So just to get back to the astrology, we have the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that took place on 22 degrees Capricorn in January, happening very close to the Uranus-Neptune conjunction that happened on 17, 18 degrees of Capricorn in 1993. So I think everything we're seeing now, some people say this whole COVID lockdown is a 50-year plan. Yes, we can go back to Dr. Richard Day, as I did in that 4-part series where I talked about everything. It has been long in the works, but I identify 1993, the establishment of the EU, the Rio summit, the real start of the push towards the Agenda 21, that can all be traced back to 1993. It was just after communism had so-called collapsed in Soviet Union and Eastern Europe and East Germany, but the new communism was being born, and that was the genesis of everything we kind of see exploding now. But this whole Saturn-Pluto conjunction happening on that, yes, it's helped it manifest, but it also means that now the fight back against it for a new non-crony capitalism is also going ahead. So it's a time of great change, but it's opportunity for our side as well. We have to see it that way. More businesses I see collapsing. The big accounting firms. Do you know that with blockchain, real-time auditing is now possible? It's going to make all these auditors totally defunct, and they're going to have to find a new business model. So I think these accounting firms are beginning to log on that changes in blockchain are going to seriously damage their tried and tested business model. Now, you see accounting, it's a long-term thing, accounting companies, they're very establishment. They've been going for ages, bookkeeping and all that. But there's about to be a big change. So that's another establishment thing that you're going to see collapsing. Airlines definitely, because they don't want people flying. I think with the way tourism's going, with the quarantine, etc., that's going. Cars as well. The idea with cars is to make them so uniform that there's no kind of excitement or kudos to getting a new car because they're all going to look the same. They're all going to be electric. Then it'll be the profitability of companies will go down because cars are sold on image. Very important. All the advertising to do with cars is related around image. That's why they advertise so heavily. Once the image is gone, people don't buy cars. We can be then eased into electric cars, totally traceable, can be switched off, as your diesel and petrol car can't be, and then eased into the kind of Uber-style driverless cars, which will all be taxis. So all these car companies as well, you're going to see them disappearing. So just to go back to the violence with all this, it's a distraction, along with the story about Maddie McCann. They had the Dominic Cummings thing, the biggest sort of dead cat nonsense ever. Did anyone care, really? Did it really affect anyone? No. I mean, we're facing the biggest economic catastrophe, but we had to hear about Dominic Cummings for 2 weeks, all sorts of nonsense. But then the apparently new lead about Madeline, this guy's been on the radar for years. It's not really a new lead. It's very much an old lead, but we only allowed to hear from the Gamble, forgotten his first name, Mike Gamble, and Clarence Mitchell, who, as Sonia Poulton said, well, they got a horse in the race, honestly, so that's not impartial comment, but that's also a bit of a distraction. So I think a lot of things with these riots, also to direct the focus off Bill Gates. Apparently that, but it's not really working. Soros is having 500,000 tweets just today of people really hating on him, as some people would say in the colloquialism. So, as I say, they're putting their cards on the table, and the more they're doing that, the more we're finding out what they're really about. So let's have a look. You guys probably saw Prince Charles cropping up. Andrew was cropping up today. As I said back in January, this is going to be a very difficult year for him. Pluto is causing a lot of trouble in his chart because it's squaring his Aries midheaven. So his future greatly in doubt. He is, it's squeaky bum time chart-wise for Andrew. Pluto, as I say, is bringing chickens home to roost, a lot of karma for Andrew. So he's not out of the woods. But his brother has been talking about this World Economic Forum's big reset. And he was saying that it's important, this is Prince Charles, to realize sustainable development. Oh, yeah, that's Agenda 21. Sustainable development sounds very cozy, but it means you ain't taking those holidays anymore, guys. You're not taking those road trips. You're staying at home, you're working at home, and you're going to be rationed. That's what it really means. He also talked about having more growth without damage to the environment. Yeah, well, why don't they go and speak to China about that? Because last I looked, they're the world's biggest polluter. He also said, Prince Charles, that the mothballing of the economy that we've just had because of COVID-19 had shown what was possible. Now, didn't I say that at the outset in my blog that was called Many Agendas Served? They were going to show people through this COVID how important it was to work from home, how they didn't really need to be taking unnecessary car trips, how they didn't need to be running in and out to theatres, to movies, to restaurants, right? It's been like, when you train a dog, well, that's kind of what they've been doing to us, haven't they? Training us into a new way of thinking, telling us, no, it's great to be at home baking your banana bread. You just really don't need those holidays. You just sit in your garden. It's going to be lovely and sunny. Didn't you find it odd that we had those massive thunderstorms during the protests, and they did in Washington too? London had huge thunderstorms, really violent on the Saturday, and so did Washington. Even the Washington Monument was struck by lightning. And I thought, just wondered if that wasn't coordinated to kind of dampen down the protests and that. So, yeah, Charles was also talking about carbon pricing and net zero transitions. I've heard of net zero emissions, but I'm not sure it might have been a typo by the journalists. When you expect that from Sky News, they're not getting their massive salary, so they're slackening up on the job. And IMF boss, whose name is Kristalina Georgieva, she said that one of the things they want to do after COVID as part of this reset is to raise welfare and health standards. And she uses the example of after the war when the NHS was established and how great that was. But I just don't think it's that era anymore. And she talked about a greener, a smarter, smarter, you are going to be surveilled to death. That's what they mean by smarter. A fairer world. Well, as I say, as soon as people talk about fairness and justice, you just know that they're going to be all these people pontificating what that really means, and it'll end up dragging everyone down to the lowest common denominator. She said that this fairer world was the perfect response to COVID, and it would honor the dead. This is very much Saturn, Jupiter, and Aquarius thinking. It's very much idealistic, pie in the sky, Aquarius thinking. Aquarius being a sign associated with communitarianism and communism rather than individualism, individual rights, property rights. You can see the talk there. Raising welfare, that's universal basic income that they want everyone to be on. I think that's what they mean about raising welfare. And she said there, we have never had a better chance. Well, exactly. I guess they haven't, but they engineered it, didn't it? It wasn't just luck that everything fell their way, I don't think. She also said that we, in other words, the IMF, is she meaning? The globalists? She said, we have no owners, no paymasters, no oligarchs pulling our strings. We are independent. Sorry. Ha, ha, ha. Who are they kidding? Is that a parody of the thing? I mean, that couldn't be that. If that's not talking in opposites, then I don't know what is. But of course, all these people talking about a fairer world, they're not directing that at China, who have one of the most racist societies, the most appalling human rights abuses, biggest crackdowns on individual liberties, what they're doing with the Uyghurs, of course, 1 million people, virtually a slave camp. But this is all directed at us. To get back to the riots and what Tucker Carlson is saying, I just want to touch on that a little bit as well. It's again stoking discontent in people, encouraging people to believe that this Western society we live in is really terrible and that there's this all systematic institutional racism and unfairness. People are being encouraged to believe that, and encouraged also to see any problems they've had in their lives through the prism of that, rather than just through the prism of, well, like they say, shit happens, excuse my language. Bad things happen to everyone. It's not necessarily always to do with racism, but I think a lot of people are encouraged to view it that way. Lots of different sorts of unfairness happens, and I always say the disabled people are the most discriminated people against in society, yet they have no advocacy whatsoever, and no one really talks up for them. But I was quite curious about some of the things they said about the Floyd guy. Apparently, it's quite a rap sheet. He was recently in prison for 5 years for burglarizing a pregnant woman's home and terrorizing her with a gun to her head while he did it. This is what the BBC described as a low point in his life. I'd say it's a little bit more than a low point, because as Anne-Marie Waters said, loads of us have a low point in our life, but it doesn't involve terrorizing a pregnant woman with a gun in her own home with a gang of burglars. So they were saying that he'd apparently worked with this cop in a club in Minneapolis for 17 years. But then again, if he's been in and out of prison 5 times, how has he managed to clock up 17 years working somewhere? Then someone else said he'd moved from Houston, was born in North Carolina, but was living in Houston, and he moved to Minneapolis to make a new start and have better opportunities. So when was that? Because he couldn't have really been, was he in Houston 17 years ago and then he went to Minneapolis? Then the neighbors of this cop said they were convinced that the cop was an estate agent. They had no idea he was a cop. Lots of oddness about the story, but I think to get caught in the details is to miss the point that this is just, again, to create discontent, to create anarchy, to further deal a blow to Western society, to weaken the foundations of Western society and democracy, because once America's gone, the rest of the West have no hope, really. To get back to, as I say, to what Tucker Carlson was saying, you have these people like Arthur Hirsch and June Sapong and Yasmin Allenby Brown, most of them who write for The Guardian, who are kind of pushing certain agendas and issues all the time. The Guardian is loss-making, but there's a hedge fund of $1 billion waiting to just bail them out. So they kind of draw off that. So yes, they rage against the machine, so-called, yet they're part of the machine. And do you notice that all these people who constantly talk about the evils of white privilege, like the people I just mentioned, Arthur and June and Alibi and Brown and all these people, and Stormzy, have they ever got anything to say about Bill Gates, about George Soros? Because the last time I looked, Bill Gates, George Soros, Sergey Brin, Susan Wojcicki, well, she's not male, but all these people are white. Even if you're going to go to Macron, to Ted Turner, to Warren Buffett, or the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, they're all white. They are bastions of white privilege, and yet you won't ever hear these people talking out about them. They're angry about a slave trader from 200 years ago, but they are not angry about the people who today are working with China, who have 1 million people doing slave labor, namely the Uyghurs, namely other people in China doing slave labor. A lot of these rioters protesting are wearing their Nikes and their garments from sweatshops. There's modern day slavery happening right now. Yes, they're obsessed with slavery 200 years ago, but they're doing absolutely nothing to speak out about slavery right now. And the fact that in Libya there are slave markets as we speak, slavery is still happening in Africa. It's certainly happening in parts of Asia, and they need to be talking about China, but they're not, because their entire focus is on America. Then you have these people like Author and that continually on the struggle. Oh, they've got to speak out, but they get every platform in the world. Every door is open for them. You can never turn a TV on without seeing them. Who's being deplatformed? It's Christian conservatives. Conservatives in general cannot get access to these platforms, whereas whether it's Antifa or all these people, they're constantly on Twitter, never facing a problem, are they? They are free to spout their propaganda, to push their views all the time. And as I say, their views are highly questionable, because the thing they talk about most, they're not really bothered about. They're part of it. So, the system they hate, they moan about all the systematic racism, systematic this, the system supports them. I mean, whether it's Netflix, Google, PayPal, Twitter, Silicon Valley, even the Queen coming out in support of Black Lives Matter, the politicians, all the big money, the big banks, they're talking about a system who's totally behind them, who's supporting them, who's in many cases paying the legal fees of people who were arrested on the riots to get them out. So it's very vague what they want. They're talking about overthrowing something, and yet they're in with the very thing they apparently want to overthrow. So what do they really want to do? They just want to bring in a new form of communism with a monopolistic oligarchic communism. Sorry about that. Something flying over there. I obviously got too excited. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say about all that. So there you go. There's people who are talking about the establishment are absolutely part of the establishment. They talk about, the right-wing authoritarian fascism. currently the people who are conservatives in any way, and not necessarily only right-wing, because we unite with people like Piers Corbyn, for example, on the far left. There are a lot of people on the left and the right that are now coming under the umbrella of right-wing, and we are definitely not part of the establishment. We're totally against it. So totally ostracized by it as well. So the government are talking about the second wave. They're still obsessed with this meaningless R number. They talk about the science, but we all know science is in a constant state of flux. There's absolutely no agreement, really, in the scientific community. So whenever they're talking about science, it's just specifically selected science, and that's it. Now, I believe that Boris Johnson was approached by the Transport Secretary, and I think it was the ex-chancellor, and they said to him that this quarantine, where you have to be in 2 weeks quarantine if you fly into the country, is a very, very bad idea for jobs. And apparently he was shocked. He hadn't thought of it. This was a quote from the Mike Graham's show this morning with Peter Hitchens, and he said that Boris was shocked. So this is the sort of leadership we have. We talk about all the possible economic effects of lockdown, and we realize that our leaders haven't really got a clue that there might be economic effects. So that's it. So there you go. So statues are coming down, very similar to what was happening in America. It won't be long before they'll have Churchill down as well. It's the absolute attack on the fundamentals of our culture. Nothing is sacred to these people. Everything that represents the past, they want gone, and people need to wake up and realize this. And just to end on the final thing that Peter Hitchens was saying, in the manner of policing these riots, where it's very much hands-off, kind of let it happen, don't intervene in case it makes it worse. He said that that was very much pioneered by Cressida Dick back in her days with Thames Valley Police in Oxford. And he said in 2004, he wrote a book depicting how policing would be in 20 years' time. He said absolutely no one was interested in reading that book, but he said everything in there is exactly how policing is being done now. And he predicts in that book that Cressida Dick will go on to be the chief of police, etc. Now, I believe he made those predictions because he understands the role of common purpose, the so-called charity, but it's a neurolinguistic programming kind of influencing body with which loads of civil servants, including police, nurses, etc., go for training. Common purpose has infiltrated the civil service, it's infiltrated police, and Cressida Dick, according to UK Column, is part of Common Purpose, which is why she's risen to the very highest level. And Common Purpose have directed this police to this new way of policing. Obviously, you guys will all have your thoughts on what exactly that entails. I think it's quite obvious. To end off, some people are saying, oh, well, police brutality in America, it's down to Donald Trump, or he's making the police do this, he's making the police do that. I would question how in control people like Boris Johnson and Donald Trump are of the police. I think police are now a separate entity, not controlled by the government, but who are influenced by corporations, NGOs, and we're moving towards a private police force. We don't know who they'll answer to. So there's big changes going in the way policing is done. Peter Hitchens sort of ended off by saying we're all sleepwalking into a new reality, and they're just kind of hoping we'll all forget about the past reality. When I talked about Dr. Richard Day, he talks a lot about TV programs and music and having the oldies channels. I don't think it'll be too long before they phase out older forms and older TV shows, like TV shows from the 80s that a lot of us grew up with. I think they'll be phased out because just now they won't want people to have a reference point of how things used to be, because otherwise younger people who have grown accustomed to what we're going to have now might start watching that and thinking, hey, that was better than this is rubbish. So I think they're going to start phasing out all those old shows and old films. So let's watch out and see if that happens, because I don't think they want people to make those comparisons, if you ask me. We know that police kind of side with Antifa. They stand aside. We've had numerous people, the Milos, the Katie Hopkins, I think Anne-Marie's talked about it, Gemma Doherty's talked about when they try and have events and they get intimidated by Antifa, the police let it happen. So there's a kind of unholy alliance going on there. So we need to question who exactly the police are answerable to. I think the whole reason the army is being defunded, because generally people in the army are still very, very patriotic, and they would be on our side against these globalist elites. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I had an awful lot to say, and with reference to a lot of current events. Don't forget, we have the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that's helping our side. So nothing's in stone yet. So keep waking people up around you. Keep talking about these issues. If you know anyone who fancies what I've been talking about in these videos, please go ahead and share them, because I don't go crazy. I'm not on Twitter a lot. I don't publicize like crazy because, I think you guys, if you enjoy and appreciate, you can always forward on. And I know you appreciate a lot of what I chat about. I haven't been reading your comments. I see so many of them here. I'll just have a quick look and see. It's all about Trump. They're scared of him. Yeah, I was listening recently to Harry Vox. I suggest you all follow Harry Vox on Twitter. Make sure it's the right Harry Vox, and voxnews1.com. He was saying the thing about Trump is, although he was a billionaire, he was never invited to the table. He was always excluded. He was never part of the set. Rockefellers, Turners, Trump, Buffetts, and all those, right? And he said he's never been in with all the Raytheons and the what else? What's that other big, basically the military-industrial complex. He owes them nothing, and that's why they are very scared of Trump, because he hasn't spent his career being bought off. Obviously, he's one person, and a lot of people are really annoyed that he's being too influenced by Ivanka and her husband, which I wouldn't say Ivanka's not up to no good, but the husband kind of is dodgy. He's a globalist, so a lot of people think he listens to Ivanka way too much. He needs to be listening to Don Jr., I think, a lot more. But look, Trump can't do everything, but I'm pleased we have him. People are very happy with Bolsonaro at the moment. He's great. And let's just hope Matteo Salvini can get back in control in Italy some time and get this going. But they're all anarchists. Yes, it's all about anarchy. Anarchy is the perfect way. It's Bolshevism. I would call it Bolshevism. It's a repeat of what was going on in... the funding is the same as well, guys. It's Bolshevism, really. Just think of it that way. Okay, the elite's reign is over. Yes, they've played all their cards. The cards on the table. Too many people are waking up. We need to crush the hard left and Marxists. Yes, PG, they're not as popular as they seem. They go on Twitter and they're in the echo chamber and they think that there are loads of them. But, Boris Johnson did have a landslide, and I think Trump's going to have a landslide because people do not like the hard left. They spend too much time in their echo chamber. Hello, Lady V. Hi. Trump 2020, it will be. Soros has funded all the fall. Absolutely. And his son, apparently it's Alexander Soros. The baton has been passed on to. He's funding it, and there's some others too. This is all Feynman experienced painful. Oh God. Oh, no, please don't advertise Viagra on my stream. No one's interested in Viagra at the moment. Well, personally, I'm not. We need all businesses open. Absolutely. Everyone needs to get back to work, but it's going to be hard work to get it all going. George, all of a sudden, there's a twin brother. Who's that? Piers O'Meara. George has got George Calloway and Piers. I mean, they're having a total bromance over this whole thing. Is that still going on? It was mad. Ginger Cat, so delighted to catch this live after getting home from work. Thank you, Lisa, for your detailed... Thank you, Ginger Cat. I don't want to go on about stuff that everyone else is talking about. There's already enough kind of channels that do that. So I did want to bring you a little astrological context. I would still like to do Gates's chart, Abramovich's chart, although I was waiting for some information on Marina, and look at the chart of the USA in detail on the other screen, just showing you the chart. But I did want to give you a little astrological context today. Lisa is the best. Thank you, guys. It'll peak for 4 to 6 weeks, then drop off to a trickle. Due to lack of jobs. Yes, that's the lightning strike, peak a little bit and then down again. I agree with you. Clothing retailers still have stockrooms full of winter stock. Yes, that's true. The stockrooms are absolutely full. They're just not going to move it because people are not in the mood for fashion because there's nowhere to wear it. It's just changed people's whole lifestyle, and usually a holiday peps people up to buy. Lisa's full of great info. Thank you. As I say, I try and bring everything to you, then give my little slant on some things that you won't have heard other places and throw it all together. Rioters are paid, absolutely. New World Order, globalists, terrorists, absolutely. Hello from New Zealand. How are you doing down there? Max Egan really doesn't have any time for your premiere. Apparently she was saying that the only trusted source of information is the New Zealand media and the government, and people shouldn't trust anything else. That's what I heard her saying in a really flat voice. She's just gone full on authoritarian. Millions have furloughed themselves out of a job. Yes, I think a lot of people got very lazy and they thought maybe furlough is an easier option. There will be no jobs, no cash. Absolutely, PG. People haven't mentioned that a lot. I don't hear. I have watched the Dollar Vigilante, but no one touches on the economy. I did see Max Kaiser has had a few things to say, and also the other guy, I've forgotten his name, he was on with Brian Rose on the 28th of May, if you want to catch that up. It was a very long week. My mum and I watched kind of halfway through, and then he started waffling on base stuff we've heard a million times before. No one's really sticking their neck out on how bad this is going to be economically. I like to talk about it a bit more. As I say to you, I'm going to stick my neck out and say department stores going, airlines going, car manufacturers going. Watch out for a lot of big names, and the universities going downhill on this one. Please do, except at the moment our borders are closed. Oh, your borders, yeah. They're still taking it awful serious. My best friend in Chile was telling me how crazy it is there. Apparently, you can go to the hairdresser and a nail bar in Chile, but you can only walk your dog twice a week, and you can only go shopping twice a week for 3 hours only. And they also have to go online and fill out a form on a government website, print it out, so that they can take their papers with them. So you can only get your form printed out twice a week to do your shopping. Chile don't even have that many cases. Queensland still won't open up their borders, apparently. And I know it's still very strict in South Africa, where they even have to wear a mask when they drive. I've seen people doing that here. How do they think that's protecting them? I don't know. Universities are losing their power to mold the minds. Yeah, well, most of them are infiltrated by the Chinese. Apparently, a lot of good information coming out of Stanford University. They're still fairly independent of the Chinese, but Harvard is totally corrupted by Gates and Epstein. Apparently, they said Gates was working with Epstein to lure a lot of scientists at Harvard into a honey trap so they kind of have something on them. But as I say, I'm just putting that out there. I can't say whether that's true or not, but there's definitely something odd going on with Epstein and the scientists. I'd like to have more to say about that. It's the censorship makes the agendas obvious. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you just got to know with all the censorship, they're terrified that this is catching on. And it really is. Look at the views on all these things. People have caught on. People in the mainstream media sitting there talking to a vacuum because no one's really paying any attention. I mean, even on the kind of Maddie story, loads of people saying, yeah, it's just the regular, we've heard it all before, let's have a proper investigation. COVID is Marxism, it certainly is. New communism. What do you think about the Black Lives Matter bullshit? It's just an anarchist outfit, like Hope Not Hate and Black Lives Matter and all. They have nice sounding sustainable development. I mean, they all have nice sounding titles. How can anyone disagree with these titles? Everyone would think, yeah, Black Lives Matter, absolutely. Everyone would agree with it, but it just covers up, as you read when I read the Tucker Carlson thing, what the actual motivations of Black Lives Matter are. It's anarchy. It's getting criminals released from prison. It's against the family. So these are not good things. They're not reflected in the title, right? So I think it's just, and it's totally infiltrated by Antifa. It's all the usual suspects. I bet you had a lot of Remainers there who are taking out their anger, and just liberals who just want a fairer, happier kind of world, but they don't really understand anything about the true agenda. It's just a farce. Hi, lady, looking forward to this. Had an eye out for news on Deutch Bank. Absolutely, they goners. This, I'm positive, this Jupiter-Pluto thing, which is very strong in their chart, that's going to be the nail in their coffin. Been like this. They're hanging on by a thread. We need the old guard to die. Luckily, a lot of these people are very, very old, and it doesn't always work that you can pass it on to your kids. Like, for example, you probably find Roger Federer's kids won't be any good at tennis, just like Boris Becker's kids aren't interested in tennis, nor McEnroe's. So in the same vein, these globalists' kids not necessarily going to be carrying things out exactly like their oldies were. Electric cars will never sell. Yeah, I think that's going to be a failure, the whole thing. People have got cars in there. People are motorheads, especially guys. It's real. They really are. The guys love their cars, and girls as well. I don't think that's going to win. Hi, Lisa. I have all of your books. Oh, hello. Hi, Nicole. Wow, that's great. Thank you very much. You'll have to tell me which ones you've actually got, the fiction ones or the diet ones, because I have got lots of pseudonyms as well that I write under. Thank you very much for supporting me. Guys, if any of you want to go on to YouTube, to Amazon, and buy any of my books, I've got some excellent fiction title, Next of Sin. It's under Lisa Gordon is the name it's under, and also Not Innocent, Not Guilty, which I wrote with a friend of mine. It's under the name Jax Logan. It's a nice UK-based mystery thriller with a bit of spy. It's quite funky. And then there's my book that was kind of more romantic and about a little bit of astrology with a thriller element called A Sealed Fate. That's also under Lisa Gordon. Plus all my other books, Lisa Lazuli. You can find plenty of them. And I've got a book on herbs for depression as well, and it's called Depression Busters as well. It's yeah, it's quite a quick read, but loads of useful information packed in. So thank you guys for buying my books and supporting. It's really great. And electric vehicles are 15 to 20 years away. Yeah, they're rolling out 5G. I noticed that. Other day we were taking a little country ride, and suddenly in the middle of nowhere looked up, and it's ugly. They really are ugly, these towers. How many live in tower blocks, flats, and cannot plug in at home? Yes, that's true. Well, I suppose all those, I noticed many tower blocks going up where we are. Have you seen pictures of how they want to transform Watford to make it look like Manhattan? There's no parking. So they're anticipating these people will not have cars. They'll either work from home or have to commute in a different way. They're definitely anticipating most people working from home. Hence why all these flats don't even have spaces for cars, right? Cryptocurrencies are not a tangible item. They're invisible money. They can be wiped out. No, they're decentralized. And on the blockchain, it's very difficult because even if you infest one, it's based on a network of computers that are totally decentralized. And every computer holds the blockchain blueprint. And that's where cryptocurrencies are very strong. They also have this hashing function, which is great protection. So there's a lot going on with the development in blockchain that mean cryptocurrencies are going to become very viable, very strong, and also free from political influence with a greater deal of privacy. And it's also a trustless system because it relies on the consensus of a vast network, so it's very impossible to corrupt the entire thing. So I think it's got a bit of may not be tangible, but it could be just what we need. Okay. Yeah. So sorry, I don't know who you're talking to there, GS, about PG. Maybe you're having a individual argument there. Slave traders in Bristol and Liverpool were often philanthropists. Well, Mark, do you think back in the day, everyone was kind of involved in that? And I think, fortunately, it's passed, and the UK had a great deal to do with ending it, which should be a positive thing. And people should be more concerned with the sweatshops and the slave injustices that are going on now, rather than people who already have passed away a long time ago. Isn't that so? Yeah. Best wishes to everyone. Thank you, Ginger Cat. It's a comfort to know that other people share the views that Lisa articulates so clearly. Thank you, guys. Thank you very, very much. I hope I give you little ideas of things that you can explore with family members and friends. I have been exploring them. I can tell you we had a tradesperson come to the house. His name was Cliff, in case he's watching. He was right on board with everything we talk about, even more so. He even enlightened me about some things that I hadn't heard of. And of course, I let him into it. Totally on board. I've got two lovely guys who come from Waitrose to deliver. They are totally on board. Know it all. They're totally on board. And so I do seem to come across many people, and I've kind of chatted randomly to people I've met about this, and the idea amongst a lot of them, even people who haven't looked into it at all, who've maybe watched one YouTube video, just one, and they said to me they feel that it's all part of an agenda, and they're not thinking too deeply about it, but they're skeptical. So a lot of people are. And thank you guys, willing to come on here and share, because I don't always share on Facebook, although the beginning of this, nearly everyone I knew on Facebook was totally, washed away. But now it's about, I don't know, maybe 5% of people on my Facebook kind of brave enough to talk about it. And I think there's a lot more that are thinking like we're thinking, just not brave enough to say because they don't want to be slapped down or have a label of conspiracy theorists put on them. Thank you, PG. Thank you, Curlian Epic Rant. Was I ranting? Not as much as Candace Owen, though, was I? Keep talking, keep sharing. Yeah, I want to do a lot more. Yes, the debate about crypto will go on. A great show as always. Thank you. Trading is rubbish, though. I think people need to stay away from altcoin trading. That's a highway to nothing. Trading crypto is not going to get you anywhere. That's not the way it's going to be good, if that's what you're talking about, guys. Hello, Jazz. Lovely to see your name again, Jazz. Hi. Hello, Anne, Valerie. I hope I didn't miss anyone. Lisa, what about South Africa? Oh, quite depressing what's going on there. I'll have to talk about that another time. That's the plan rolling out there in South Africa, isn't it? Make love with a face mask on. Yeah. Isn't it illegal now to make love with anyone outside your house? Yeah, I'm sure people aren't following that. Okay, Texas, Norton, Australia, New Zealand have both been bought and paid for. China's big in there, isn't that a problem for them? Okay. Thank you, Texas. I enjoy your take on things. Yes, hopefully I've got a bit of American, bit of UK, a bit of interest for the whole world there. I'm brilliant sharing with you guys. Will the S&P finally start to crumble in Scotland? It's probably another 2 years to go there before that happens, but I'll have to give you a detailed forecast, but probably got a few years to go. Hi, Em. Thank you for your message. I know you were saying the other day you hadn't seen me for a while, and I know Welsh77 was also asking where I'd been. Thank you for your concern. And I'm sorry I've been away so long. Bless you. I missed the beginning. Yes, please go back to the beginning, because it's all pretty relevant. I dipped into a whole lot of things. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being with me. We've had a brilliant chat. Thank you for the fantastic feedback. And I say thank you to everyone who's buying the books to support me as well, because that's really helpful. You don't even have to buy them, actually. If you're on Kindle Unlimited, you can just get them for free and read them, and I still get paid. So that's a brilliant way of saving money and supporting me as well. Hi, Breeder. Okay, guys, I've got to go now. Got to make some dinner. I hope you guys have a brilliant rest of the week. Stay safe, stay well. Keep taking your zinc and vitamin C and all that, and selenium as well. Bye.